Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are going to be working on the twin turbo Z06. Winter has moved in, snuck up on us, and so I basically have put the car away. I took it out for one last rip the other night, as I think I'm gonna put in the start of this video, and gave it a quick wash while my hands were freezing. Snuck it in the garage, and it's probably gonna stay here for the next 3 or 4 months. You know, the roads have been salted. It's already was too cold to get any sort of traction, as you probably saw in the clips there. If you guys have been on the channel a while know I built this car last winter and kind of dragged into this summer. I actually didn't get it tuned and basically done until August. Let's see what we got for miles. I think it's around 500 on the car. 410.9 is what it says. I believe that I started at about 60 or so miles into break in and whatnot, so we'll call it close to 500. Really not ideal. I really try and drive these things, but you know how life goes. You get busy, and like I said, the fact that I didn't finish this car until kind of late summer at this point. 500 basically trouble-free miles, so I'm happy about that. Every time I took it out, I pretty much beat on it and no real issues. So what I want this video to be is basically a 500-mile winter checkup. This motor is still brand new. It has 500 miles on it, so I'd like to do a little health checkup on that. A couple of maintenance items. I made a list over here, so let's go check that. So here's what we got so far. It's just some basic maintenance stuff. Oil change. I got a new borescope here, Amazon special. So I'd like to see what the cylinder walls look like. I already put stable in the car and filled it up with 93. Some people say it's okay to store these things with E85 in them, but me personally, just go down the street, fill it up with 93, run it for a little bit with stable in it. You know that it's going to be good for next season. Swap out the clutch fluid real quick. I'll show you guys how to do that. You have to have a C5 or C6. Also got a new compression leak down tester. We can do that. Check out the spark plugs while we're at it. And would also like to pop a valve cover or both of them and just take a look at the valve train, just to see how the rockers look, springs, make sure wear patterns look good, nothing bad. Just some really basic, 500 mile on a brand new setup checkup. Maybe pop it up on the lift to make sure that, any leaks we might have had are sealed up. And we can basically tuck this thing away for the winter. I was going to start with an oil change, but as 2020 and 2021 have been going, the newest shortage is oil. I did an oil change in my truck a week ago, and I had to get 2 different types of oil just to get 13 quarts. So here's where the oil would be, but went to the store last night and they had absolutely no Rotella T6, which is typically what I run in my vehicles. Right now the car has driven BR40 break-in oil. It's already had one oil change at that 50 or 60 mile interval, a couple heat cycles. So right now we're about to do the 3rd oil change. So I think I'm gonna, just switch it to regular synthetic. I think the motor's broken in by now. It's had a ton of wide open pulls, dyno time, 500 miles of street cruising, tons of heat cycles, 1 oil change already. So I think we're good to switch to regular oil. So I was gonna start with that, but gonna have to go get some oil at a different store later. So I think we'll start with borescoping the cylinders, checking the plugs out, and we'll go from there. Pop these plugs out and fire up the borescope. And I'll bring you guys in here in a second and show you exactly what we're looking for. Just let me get these other 2 out. All right, so I've got the passenger side plugs out, cylinders 2, 4, 6, and 8. They all look very, very similar, which is good. Couple things to note, if you guys are trying to read your plugs. What's important here is that you see the white on the tip there is about halfway down. It means your timing is good. If it's too far one way towards the bend or towards the tip, it means your timing's off. So timing here looks good. Nothing really looks out of place. It looks a little like there's a little bit of soot around the edges, but that can happen from part throttle driving around town. Also, I've done a few cold starts on this thing recently, and cars run a little rich when they're cold, but everything looks good on these plugs. Like I said, this one here really shows you, you can see that defined line right in the middle of the strap. That's exactly what you want. So this side looks good. So I'm going to pop out the other side real quick. We'll check those, and then we can check the cylinders with the borescope. But before we do that, I actually think it makes sense to do the leak down test because I think you're supposed to do that when the engine's warm. So while the car is still warm, let's pull a plug and do a leak down test on a couple cylinders, see where we're at. Well, I figured while we're waiting for this motor to cool down to the point that I can actually touch it, we might as well drain the oil while it's hot, and that can kind of drain while we're doing other stuff. Hopefully we can find some oil to replace it. That'll do. All right, so I took my little drain pan, cleaned it out really good, so that when we drain this oil, we can see if we have any major, glitter show or particles that we want to be aware of. So, again, this is this car's second oil change on this motor, so I would expect it will be dirty, but not alarmingly so. I might have to put the camera down here for a second. So there's what we got. Dirty, as you'd expect with a new motor and especially running E85, but I'm not seeing any real glitter thus far, which is really good. We'll take the oil filter off and check that too, but liking what I'm seeing so far. All right, guys, so while the oil's finishing draining, the motor's still warm. Gonna do a leak down. I've got cylinder number 2 hooked up to our compression fitting here. So we're gonna hook up shop air, apply pressure to the cylinder, and this device is gonna let us know what our leak down is. So ideally, obviously, we wanna be in the low range. Now, we might even be able to hear where it's leaking from. If it's out the exhaust, it's obviously an exhaust valve. Through the intake valve, anywhere in the valve cover or breather or anything like that, that's typically rings. So let's see how we're doing here. All right, so we're hooked up to shop air. Want to calibrate it basically to 0. So that's about where we want to be. Our cylinder, as I mentioned, is at top dead center, so both valves are closed, so we should be able to see any leakage past rings or valves. So let's hook this up and see what it says. Very good. So as you can see, got very low leakage, cylinder leakage. That whistling you're hearing is just from my crappy Harbor Freight fitting here. Yeah, I don't hear anything. And this one's reading very, very good. So I'm gonna call cylinder number 2 good. We'll check a couple more, and this engine's looking good so far. All right, cylinder 6 is at top dead center. Again, very low. Identical to cylinder number 2. That's what we like to see. You can hear a little bit of leakage through the oil fill, which means it's obviously getting past the rings, but as you can see, it's a very, very low amount. You're obviously going to have some leakage past the rings, especially being that this is a boost motor. The gap is going to be a little bit wider, but very, very good. All right, so I got the tube hooked up to cylinder number 3 on the driver's side. And what we need to do, obviously, is now rotate the crank until that cylinder is at or near top dead center. We obviously want to make sure intake and exhaust valves are closed so the cylinder is sealed. So the way I'm doing that is a 27mm wrench on the crank. And there's a couple different ways you can do this, but the easiest way for me anyways, typically is to just feel. So I've got this hooked up, I can put my thumb over it. I can feel when the piston is on, or the cylinder is on the compression stroke. And basically when it gets to the very end of that compression stroke, you know that it's at top dead center on the compression stroke. And that's when you know it's a good time to do this cylinder leak down. Because you know that both valves are definitely going to be closed at the end of the, right at the beginning of the compression stroke. So let's go until we feel this pressure. So feel nothing now. So intake or exhaust is probably open. Still nothing. Still nothing.
One eternity later.
All right, so maybe you guys could hear that. A little burst of air out of there when I let my thumb off, so we know we're on the compression stroke. So both valves should be closed. So we should be in good shape to hook up our air. Alright guys, again, very low cylinder leakage on this one. So yeah, now that my tester is quieted down a little bit, you can hear a little bit of leakage past the rings, but again, it's well within spec, so cylinder 3, good to go. Alright guys, I think you get the idea. Basically put the cylinder you want to test around top dead center on the compression stroke so you know both valves are closed. Calibrate this, set it to 0 via this knob here, and hook up the fitting and see what your cylinder leakage reads. And from there you can tell whether you have an exhaust valve problem, intake valve problem, ring problem, possible head gasket or cracked block problem, depending on where the sound is coming out of. I've tested 3, 2 on that side and 1 on this side. Everything's good, you know, right around 20% or less leakage, which is very good. I'm going to check the other ones real quick and I'll let you guys know how it does. Again, I think you get the idea at this point, but I'll follow up with you in a second. All right, finished the leak down compression test. Everything looks great. All cylinders, you know, 15% leakage or less. What's important on these tests is more consistency than the actual number. They were all within, you know, 4 or 5% of each other. This is a boost motor, so the rings are gapped a little looser, so you might see a little bit more leakage than you'd expect to see on a higher compression motor, but either way, everything seems good. The oil finish draining, I went out some more oil. Like I said, normally I run Rotella T6, but still out everywhere, so I'm going to try this Valvoline full synthetic European. It's supposed to be good stuff, so I already popped the filter on, pre-filled that. Let's dump the rest of this oil in, and then I might also do a quick static compression test, and then we can borescope the cylinders and see how they look. Wow, this new oil's got a spout on there. That's nice. Down the hatch. Alright, oil change is done. Next up is the borescope. So I think if I put a memory card in this thing, I should be able to take you guys along for the ride. So let me pop one in there, scope a couple cylinders. Alright, you guys are going to have to kind of bear with me. This thing wants me to format the SD card or something like that. I don't really feel like doing it right now. Anyways, there's a few cylinders we can look at where the piston isn't, you know, basically up top dead center. And this is basically what we're looking for. Hopefully you guys can see that without too much reflection, but nice good hone crosshatch pattern. I've observed this in most of the other cylinders as well. No scarring that I can see. Everything looks good, which is what we would expect from, you know, a low mileage new motor with good leak down results and everything else. But I bought this borescope, so thought it'd be fun to use. Morning. Next day here. Went to go do my clutch fluid swap yesterday and realized that I was out of .4 brake fluid, which is what your clutch cylinder or clutch mechanism, clutch reservoir, the fluid that moves your clutch in and out. All I had was .3, and you're supposed to use .4 in these systems. So here's what you need to do your clutch fluid. DOT4 brake fluid. Go steal your wife or girlfriend's, you know, turkey baster out of the kitchen. Don't let them see you taking it. They'll probably not appreciate that. Maybe just don't bring it back. Just keep it out in the garage. And a rag. Brake fluid is very corrosive to paint. So if you get any of this on your paint, get it off immediately. Otherwise it will, you know, eat into your paint. And that's it. So I'll bring you guys in here and I'll show you how it's done. All right, so here we go. One other thing you're going to need is some sort of mechanism to drain the fluid into. I use this old protein shaker here that's been in the garage. Again, stole it from the kitchen, never brought it back. Open up the reservoir, which is the one next to the brake fluid reservoir. Get your rag ready. I kind of usually just drape it around the whole area here. Take your baster here, go right into the reservoir. Can you guys see that? Yeah, you can kind of see that. It's good enough. And suck the fluid out. So you can see my fluid was pretty clean, but again, this whole thing of brake fluid was about $3.50. You can avoid a lot of clutch problems by just keeping this fluid clean. It makes sense to do it, you know, a couple times a year. If you're going to the track, I even bring this little kit to the track with me, just because, you know, your clutch fluid's going to get dirty when you're driving aggressively. Going to want to take a rag and clean out this reservoir. Make sure there's no debris at the bottom. Get that nice and clean. Pouring brake fluid everywhere like I just did. Hopefully not on my freshly painted valve covers. Nope, just on the header to start a fire later. That's good. All right. So the reservoir is nice and clean. What I like to do, use this spark plug here, is make a little hole in the top of the brake fluid, just like that. And then you can just fill it up to the line. And that's it. Sometimes it's good to make sure your cap is clean too, here. All right, put that back on. Make sure that's on, because if you don't have it on during this next step, you're gonna make a big mess all over your paint. Get in the car, and you wanna pump the clutch like 50 times. All right, so after you pump the clutch, literally 50 times, you can come back here, and depending on how dirty your fluid was when you started this, it might be dirty again, because you're basically swapping the fluid. My fluid was clean when I started, so we're good to go here. But if your fluid is absolutely filthy, you might have to do this like 3 or 4 times. You know, empty this reservoir again into here, fill it up, pump the clutch, etc. But pumping the clutch, not only, as long as you don't let the level get below that pickup there, bleeds the system and brings all the new fluid into the rest of the system. So now we know all the fluid in our system is nice and clean. So we'll just wipe up here, and we're done with the clutch. All right. Next thing on the list is I just want to take a peek at the valve train, make sure nothing looks out of sorts, check out the rockers, maybe make sure they're still torqued to 22-ish foot-pounds. So let's pop a valve cover off and see what we're looking at. Pop the passenger valve cover off because it's the easier one to get to. And everything looks good up here. Just did that oil change, so obviously we got fresh oil up on the rockers. Everything seems nice and tight. You know, no debris or metal or particulate or anything of concern. I think I might find a valve, maybe this one here, that is on the base circle of the cam. We'll pop this rocker off, check the wear pattern on the valve stem, just to see what it looks like. And other than that, everything here looks good. In my medical opinion, automotive medical opinion, giving this thing a clean bill of health. Yeah, so guys, we ran through everything on the list, 500-mile checkup, if you will, on the Z06. Engine looks great, sounds great. All the tests came back really good. I mean, the car ran perfect. I just, wanted to check up on it before we put it away, throw the cover on it for the end of the year. And then I'd rather find out about a problem now, heading into winter, so that we can fix it before spring, but I really don't see anything. So as far as I can see, no major repairs needed. I even tossed it up on the lift. I didn't film that, but no leaks that I could see. Nothing looks out of place. Everything looks basically how it was, when we finished the project earlier this summer. Do have a couple goodies in mind for this car, for this winter. Maybe some suspension stuff, help us get this power to the ground better. Maybe some tires. Maybe, who knows, maybe some exhaust stuff, I don't know. I will make another video, and you guys will have to just wait and see at that time. But for now, thank you guys for watching as usual. Stay tuned for more stuff on the Z06, whatever else we get into this winter. Like, comment, subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.